Hello, everyone, and welcome to our dear guest, Michael. Michael, this is truly the most meaningful and important video I have been trying to create and publish for years, and thanks to you, it is finally happening. Really, I am happy about it. I really appreciate you being with us today to explore the ins and outs of job application from perspective of top hiring manager like you. Every job seekers like me is curious about what's happening behind the scenes on the hiring manager's side. What factors influence exactly the hiring process, the main reasons for rejection, interview failures, resume issues, or cover letter, and especially not receiving any interview invitation or job offers. Today, we are going to cover all of these through more than 85 questions. I will bombard you with lots of questions in this regard, and I am sure that we couldn't find anyone better than you in this regard, really. And I'm not going to bore the followers with a lengthy introduction, and the floor is yours to introduce yourself, especially regarding your experience about hiring process, and let us know if our viewers, if they wish to be in contact with you, how they can access you. Then we will start step by step the question. Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you as well, because as you said, I think this is a very important conversation to have for many individuals who are in the job market, who are seeking opportunities to understand what the hiring manager is looking for, what the companies are looking for, some best practices, and maybe even to debunk some potential myths that we have, right? So it sounds like for 85 questions today, I'll be the one being interviewed, so I'm happy to do it. It's a very fun opportunity. So a little about myself. I've been in the HR space for the better part of just over 20 plus years. I started my career in talent management and talent recruitment. I've done it for many years throughout all my opportunities within the organizations I worked for, whether that be in automotive or sports retail or even medical. All of which kind of share the same similarities in what they look for in individuals. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit more great detail. And again, I just hope everyone gets an opportunity to really take something from this and this value. And if they want to get in touch with me, we can put it up maybe in the description later on through my personal email, and of course through LinkedIn and my company Synchros HR.
Thanks for your concise and great introduction. Exactly. As you mentioned, I will put all the information on the video job description. We will have some question regarding general hiring philosophy and priorities, about 11 questions. Then about the main part, maybe resume, cover letter, and application process. After that, we will have some question, lots of questions, 22, about interview process. And also after that, about post-interview and hiring decisions and additional insights. It is a kind of wrap up. First, we are going to talk about general hiring philosophy and priorities. It is a kind of introduction. Before going on, I want to say that each slide I have brought the main question, because when you are talking, everybody knows that exactly what is going on, the main question. And for my Farsi followers, maybe their English is not, some of them are not so advanced. So I have brought the Farsi translation for them to follow up. And under each question, I have brought a tip which can help better understand the topic. Each hints are related to the question. Okay, if you are ready, we can go and start with the first question. What are the top qualities you look for in a candidate when reviewing applications?
Well, it's a good question, and I think to start off, just to maybe understand when a recruiter is looking for the top qualities in a candidate, they've already done the behind the scenes work with the hiring manager to understand really what they're looking for in their top candidate. A lot of it will be a mix and match between tactical qualities relating to the job. And then there are going to be some soft, kind of behavioral qualities that they look for as it relates to either the department, the division, or even the organization. So example of this would be if I was hiring for, say, a financial analyst. Well, obviously the top qualities I'm looking for is someone who has depth of experience in analytics, who's got a well-versed tactical experience within Excel, within SAP perhaps, etc. When it comes to the type of qualities, when it comes to behavioral or what they call competencies, that's where the hiring manager really wants to get an understanding of the type of individual they want to bring into their team. So that could be someone who is who's very detail oriented, who's diligent, and a lot of those qualities they're going to devise out of that resume screen and more specifically out of the interview. So I know when we go deeper into the conversation later on around what would be an optimal looking resume, remember, when you're talking about certain jobs that are really going to cater to the type of qualities you want to portray of yourself, it's going to show up in your resume, such as I mentioned, detail oriented or diligence in some of the experience, and even how your resume looks.
Okay, thank you. And next question. How do you prioritize hard skills versus soft skills? And has this changed over the time?
So it can change over time depending on the level of role that the interview or the company is hiring for. So hard skills and soft skills are equally important, I would say. Where this can change is if I'm hiring for an entry level position, I'm looking more for the hard skills because this individual is going to have less of a strategic accountability and more of a tactical accountability. So if we're talking about a junior analyst or a coordinator, administrative type of role, a large amount of their role or their job is going to require hands-on functional and tactical abilities, which are the hard skills. Now, if I start to look at a candidate or a particular individual or role that is more on the senior side, so at management level, senior management, even director role, the soft skills are more critically important because this individual will have to actually not only be well versed on the hard skills, but they have to be a visionary. They'll have to be able to work cross-functionally amongst different business units. They're going to have to work with C-suite on strategy and long-term planning. This requires a lot of collaboration. This requires a lot of influence. This requires a lot of negotiation. And that's where the soft skills come in. So that, I guess, shift between a junior to a senior role and what actually is the higher priority has never changed over time. It actually continues going. But as you progress within your career, that is where you'll start to see the shift in the emphasis of hard skills versus soft skills.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I have lots of questions in this regard, but I am not going to make this because we have
Maybe
lots
a
of
follow-up
questions.
video.
Yes, make it so lengthy. So we can go to the third question. How do you balance technical expertise with adaptability and willingness to learn?
I think it's a great question. And I think the emphasis around adaptability and willingness to learn should be a constant no matter what type of role you're in and what type of company you're in or how you shift through your career. Uh, excuse me, the companies will evolve, technology evolves, the way we work is going to evolve. We're seeing this now with in the recent years with ChatGPT. If you go back, say, 20 plus years, we saw that with the invention and the adoption of the internet. How we work is critically important and how we are able to adopt and that willingness to learn. You should always be looking to evolve your skills. You should always be looking to evolve your adaptability and how you approach things in a much more efficient way as the market continues to shift. So I would definitely say the adaptability and the willingness to learn is a higher priority, but your tactical fundamentals should always be a constant. So I think they're equally important, but how you flex them at different times can be also important.
Okay, thank you. Well put in. Thank you. Next question. Are there new qualities or competencies you prioritize now compared to earlier in your career? For example, adaptability, as you mentioned, digital literacy, emotional intelligence, and so on.
This is such a good question, and I think it really is relevant to what we kind of already just discussed in the sense of, as you progress within your career, you're going to have to now develop new skills and flex new, for lack of a better term, muscles when it comes to how you present yourself and how you work within the organization. I think, your ability to be emotionally intelligent is a highly sought skill for most in organizations because the ability to, prioritize but deal with the potential chaos that comes with the day to day. I mean, you might be having conflicting priorities. You might have maybe bosses that are having a bad day. You might have colleagues that are having a bad day. You got to be able to adapt and you got to be able to keep yourself calm under that pressure. I think that's a big one. The digital literacy is also a great one that you highlighted here. We've seen, I mentioned earlier, the ChatGPT advent that's been coming into business, and it's going to become more prevalent and more part of our integrated day to day sooner than we all think. not just in business, but in just day-to-day life. So the sooner we can get more comfortable with this type of new technology, the sooner we can understand it and how it works to optimize, how you can bring your skills through that technology is so important. I think your overall ability of how you can just talk about adaptability, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to, working with a new sense of skills and new sense of delivery is always going to be important for how you can adapt to the success and promote that within your career.
Okay, thank you. And I have a short question here.
Sure.
Do you see any distinct difference between flexibility and adaptability?
Not particularly. I mean, flexibility is more your agreeableness. So, you want to be able to, again, it really all depends on the role and the situation, right? I know I've been saying that a lot, but it is true. So an example, an individual in my role as an HR senior leader, I have to be able to be flexible in the sense of understanding what are the needs of the business, what are the needs of the employees, and so I kind of meet in the middle. And sometimes that requires me to be agreeable. Sometimes that requires me to push back in a respectful and diplomatic way. Adaptability is very similar in that sense, where you have to be versatile and well-versed on a lot of different areas. But you always have to, I guess, understand where you need to be more agreeable and where you need to be able to respectfully push back when it's required.
Thank you. Okay, next question. What role does emotional intelligence play in your assessment? You mentioned
Very.
some of them, but exactly we are going to read
Yeah,
this. Yeah.
I think it just I may have stomped on this question earlier when I was talking about it before, but I mean the emotional intelligence piece is critical, right? Especially as you get into more senior roles. Your ability to, what we call in the business, bring people along, which is when you're trying to negotiate and influence decision makers or the business or managers or employees, whoever it is that you're talking about here, you want them to want to follow what you're proposing. You want them to buy in. You want them to understand and see the value of what you're proposing. To have to force that is not really the win that you're looking for. What you're looking for is, and a lot of that comes from like how you deliver, how you stay calm under pressure, how you're seen as a leader. Because when you're looked upon as the individual who's calm under pressure, who's the lighthouse in that storm where your team and your company can rely on, that's a reflection of your emotional intelligence. So understanding the behaviors in yourself of how you can keep calm and keep that pleasant working demeanor is very important for a lot of talent acquisition specialists. But I'd say it's one of the more critical pieces, especially in senior leadership.
Great. That's very informative. And next question. How do you assess a candidate's strengths in Casper's core competencies? For example, collaboration, communication, empathy, ethics, all the information that our users can see under the slide. Yeah, go on, please.
Yeah, so understand that when we're talking about candidate strengths, when we're talking about the interview process, we're really only seeing a very small window in regards to how someone's behaviors and their competencies play out. So as you present yourself, you want to be able to, kind of present yourself with these aspects in mind, and that's really going to come across in how you answer your questions, your body language, your presenteeism. The full scope of understanding a candidate's competencies is not going to really play out until, as you start to get successfully into that company and you start to conduct yourself through your work. But when we're looking at interviews and we're looking at individuals, I'm usually there with a hiring manager beside me, sometimes two. And as we're going through the questions, I'm critically studying how they're answering the questions, their verbal dialogue, their ability to be calm and really communicate with efficiency. But also and don't get me wrong, I mean, plenty of people get nervous in interviews. I totally understand that. And my job to be in that room is to make you as comfortable and as calm as possible so I can get that true reflection. But overall, we're trying to get a small sense of what that looks like. And we're trying to understand how well you can communicate, and your ability to communicate your examples of work will highlight some of these competencies.
Absolutely, that makes sense, really. How do you evaluate communication skills in candidates?
This is a good question. So my one key area that and there's a lot of different areas, but the one key one that I think we'll touch on a little bit later on is how you answer a question with context. So oftentimes when I'm working with candidates and I'm interviewing them, I'm looking for a story. I'm looking for to understand what it is that you did, what are the actions you took, and then where people fall short is what happened afterwards. So what was the result of the actions that you
And
took?
these are actually memorable, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So you want to be able to, when you're telling a story, when you're talking about an example, and we've all been in those interviews where tell me about a time when you did, and then fill in the blank. I want to be able to look to you, Akbar, and say, can I get a sense that you're recalling from memory, or are you embellishing or making up the story as you go along? That's a big no-no. You're on the latter, right? So all to say
Exactly. There
is,
is another question in this regard.
yes,
Rehearsing,
yes, but we'll
rehearsing.
touch
Yeah,
on
we
that
will
for
go on.
sure.
Yeah, you go on, please. Sorry, interrupting you. Yeah, go
Yeah,
on.
but all to say is, the ability for an individual to communicate effectively is a critical assessment piece for me when I'm interviewing applicants.
Thank you. Interesting. And what soft skills impress you most during the hiring process? We talked about soft skills versus hard skills, but here specifically, I am going to know exactly what soft skills really impress you most.
Right. So I think we touched on it or alluded to it in the previous slide, being communication being the utmost, because regardless of the type of role that you're in, regardless of your role within the organization and its interaction, your ability to communicate is going to be a constant. An additional one is your critical thinking. So the ability to think dynamically and critically is a skill in and of itself that is wildly important for every organization, for every hiring manager, even if they may not verbalize it. What they need is someone who can, because there's very few roles that are very transactional and that deviate free of issues and free of problems. But when those problems come up, what the hiring manager is really looking for is, can I count on Michael? Can I count on Akbar to, be able to, think through the problem critically, think through the next 2, 3, 4 steps of what that solution might look like and how it's going to be, and because they don't want to, get involved in every single issue. So I would say communication and critical thinking are by far the top skills I always look for in a top candidate.
Exactly. And I can add a point that maybe based on the job description, for example, a
Absolutely.
kind of job description needs creativity. So it is much better to put emphasis in this regard. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I think when you're reviewing the job description, you want to be able to adjust your resume as needed and adjust um your interview skills as required, like to highlight the critical points that they're looking for. I agree.
Great. How important is cultural fit and how do you assess it without allowing bias, like race, religion,
Right.
gender, and so on?
Absolutely. So I think the first aspect what we have to address is when we talk about cultural fit, we're not talking about race, religion, and gender and anything of that sort. What we're actually talking about from a company point of view is the culture of the organization as to what they hold dear to the organization. So that could be, whether it's goal orientation, whether it's the ability to collaborate and be a team that's unified. So when they're looking at individuals who are looking to join their team, really what they're looking for is someone who has a moral compass that aligns with their cultural values. So that is independent of any type of bias. Now, does the potential for bias exist in any day to day? I'm sure it does. I can say with a 100% certainty in the companies that I've worked for, we have never had to run into that problem. I've never worked with a hiring manager, thankfully, in my entire 20 plus year career, who had a bias around race, religion, or gender. I'm not suggesting it doesn't exist out there because I'm sure there are, unfortunate examples where it does. But when we're talking about a cultural fit, we're talking about the individuals who are the hiring managers who are looking to bring individuals in who align to their not only existing culture, but one that they're looking to build for the long term.
Okay, thank you. What behaviors or attitudes turn you off immediately? It is a very important question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's a fine line between confidence and smugness, or I guess cockiness, or in being in that when you present yourself as an individual who is beyond the process or is bothered by the process or bothered by the questions, it is an immediate turnoff. Adversely, if someone who is either ill-prepared and not taking it seriously is also a turnoff. So I think, when you want to really kind of present yourself as someone who not only is prepared, but is humble through the process as well. You can have a lot of confidence in your skills. You can, and I encourage everyone to have that confidence in what you bring to the table, but balance that with humility. I think that's the key that, a lot of people will pick up on and appreciate when you're in that interview process.
Okay, amazing. Okay. Can you describe any red flags that might disqualify an applicant early on?
Sure. So when we're talking about disqualifying an applicant early on, I think we're talking about the application process, so what your resume looks like, right? And I think there's two things that can be pretty an immediate, I guess, red flag is when there's inconsistencies in your resume. And what I mean by that is, are there grammatical errors? Are there actual spelling errors? Formatting, things of that sort. So I think, when we're talking about those inconsistencies on the visual appearance of your resume, and if you're in the ability to actually get into the, an interview process, you want to be able, like I said, you want to be able to speak through your abilities with a clear and succinct and concise manner. So someone who is maybe going on way too long, explaining way too much with too much detail, or not enough, being overly succinct, you want to find that right balance. So what it shows me, and the reason why it's a red flag, is that it tells me that you haven't really fully prepared for this conversation.
And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about resume, cover letter, application process. First, we will have some question regarding resume. What makes a resume stand out within 30 seconds?
Great question. So the immediate thing that what stands out for me is when it's very organized. And we're going to show an example, I think, later on, where we'll see two resumes with equal content, but what each other will look like and how it separates each other out. When it's organized and it's not overly cluttered, it's much easier to read. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, are the headings in there where I can skim through, okay, education, experience, professional skills, maybe their certifications or the technology that they've worked on. So is it very clear, concise, and clean for me to look at optically is the very first thing that makes sense to me. And it really will stand out. Things, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next coming slides, and I'll elaborate more on some of what these are.
Okay, thank you. And which section do you prioritize first? Education, skills, experience, etc. When you are looking through the resume?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. So I think so for me, it's experience. Now, recruiters all kind of work in very different ways. What I've always done is I understand the job I'm hiring for like the back of my hand. I've studied it. I've worked with the hiring manager. I've done my discovery meetings and understood what they're looking for. So what I'm looking for is first of all, the experience. So are their experiences aligned to what I am looking for? And that could be either someone who's already doing the job, and this would be a lateral move over if they were successful coming over, or someone who's been working towards a progression in their career and they're ready for that next step, which I'm potentially offering them in this role. So the experience is critical. From there, the skills kind of go hand in hand in that, because what I'm seeing in that experience is I can start to get an assessment of the type of skills that they have. So the type of work that they've done, whether they've done, detailed analytics, whether they've done strategy, vision, etc. The education piece is probably the lowest on my criteria, unless I'm looking for very specific credentials. And the reason I say this is usually your experience will offset the education piece that you may have done 10, 20 years ago. And it's great. Don't get me wrong. Education is important. I'm a very big advocate of it. But when I'm looking at your experience and I see that you're maybe at a manager level and the last time you did some education was perhaps, when you graduated with a BA or an MBA, 10 to 15 years ago, that's great. It's a value add, but it's not going to be the highest priority on my list.
Okay, thank you. How long do you typically spend reviewing a resume exactly? Because I have heard 10 seconds, 20 seconds.
No, it's definitely not that low. So I go through a couple of different phases of resume review. So if I'm hiring for a job, keep in mind that if I'm hiring for when I post a role over the course of like say a month, that role might receive anywhere between 100 to 200 applicants. So I'm reviewing all these and I'm spending probably about a good 15 to 20 seconds per resume at the initial part, just checking off, okay, I need to skim through to understand, okay, where are they on their experience level? What do they have a couple of areas that are catching my eye on the experience piece that I can then put them into the yes column where and at that point, when I start to take that, say 200 batch of resumes, I've now condensed it down to 50. And from those 50, now I'm going to spend a little bit more time reviewing it. So I'm going to go through it again. I'll probably spend a good maybe 5 to 10 minutes going through it, circling maybe some areas I want to do. And from those 50, I'm probably going to condense it down to about 15 to 20 that I'm now going to be reaching out and talking to.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Do you prefer chronological, functional, or hybrid formats?
So chronological, 100%. It's much easier to follow, and it makes more sense on the hiring manager side to understand it and kind of what that trajectory of experience has been. So keep in mind, what we're trying to understand is not only the most current experience that you're working with and all the great things like skills and functionality that the individual presents, but we want to see that story. Where did you start and how it flowed up in reverse chronological order? So I think chronological is by far the most important.
Thank you. How important is tailoring a resume to each job posting?
I would say pretty important. So here, and let me give you some reasons why I'm not 100% sold on tailoring it for every job posting, but I would recommend having multiple different resumes. It really depends on what you're looking for, right? So the type of resume that you should have, your standard, generalized format resume that will be kind of your starting ground.
You mean that having a master resume that having
Exactly.
all the details? Yeah, okay.
Yes. And then from there, if you're seeing a job posting that you think could you'd be better served to highlight certain areas, create a version of that and have that, really fine-tuned, and that would be your presented resume. Like typically you would have 2 or 3 versions. It's not uncommon for that. Having a one master catch-all version, you can get success with that. I'm not saying that's not possible, but I would always recommend custom tailoring your resume in a couple of different ways, depending on the end goal that you're seeking.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, what are common mistakes that get a resume rejected?
That's a good question. So common mistakes, I think, we touched on a little bit on those, like where there's inconsistencies on the resume, whether they're grammatical or spelling. Missing dates would be another one, or but a formatting, when the resume is in Word, that can be a problem. And the reason I mean, because all resumes should be built in Word, but when you're applying, I would always recommend applying in PDF form in your resume, because when you apply in Word, the version that you have versus the version that the employer might have might like skew the formatting of your resume, and that could end up getting rejected because it makes it seem like they're not understanding that it could be a formatting or a version issue.
What about JPEG picture? Some people send it as a picture.
I would not recommend JPEGs. No, I think when you're building your resume in Word, a quick save as a PDF and keeping both of those files on your desktop would be recommended, because the PDF version is your clean, uneditable version that you are then putting forward as your master.
And be sure that you have attached it, because some people
Yeah.
send the letter but they forget actually to attach the file.
Yes,
How do
good
you
point.
assess non-traditional career paths or employment gaps?
So I think those, like when I assess them in my conversation with the individual. I never typically, I don't, not typically, I just don't make judgment calls on those type of employment gaps because they can happen for a variety of reasons. I mean, whether you're taking time off to build a family, whether you're taking time off to immigrate to a new country, whether you're taking time off for education, all those things can happen. So if I'm seeing an individual's resume and their skills and experience align with what I'm looking for, and they might have a gap of a few years or even a few months, wherever that time is, I'm still going to put them in the yes column. I'm still going to reach out to them and have a conversation, but it would be a point I bring up and just quickly ask them, I see there's a gap in your resume. Maybe you can help me understand, kind of what took place here. And usually it's a pretty straightforward, simple response, and one of the ones I've made mention of earlier, and that's good to go.
Okay, how do you evaluate international degrees and experience? For example, somebody from Iran. Does
Mhm.
listing international education or experience create bias?
No, it does not. No, at least not in my experience and over my 20 plus year career. International experience is just as valuable and it's equal to anything that we have within Canada. Where I will put a caveat in is depending on the type of role that you're seeking, it might require Canadian experience. So what I mean by that is, so in certain professions, you need accreditation and you need to have that certification of your credentials to come over to Canada because the laws are different and the applications are different. If I were to personalize this even in my own profession, if I were to look at someone as a candidate within HR, their international experience matters. But when I'm looking, depending on the type of role, I need them to be well versed on Canadian employment law, labor laws, health and safety laws. And while those can be learned on the job and those can be learned in tandem by doing the job, it really just depends on the depth of that experience. So it's not a straight yes or no. I would say it is free from bias. It would not hinder you to have education and experience from a different country coming into Canada. But it would be also a preparation of understanding that depending on what you are applying for could require an equivalency of knowledge and accreditation to the Canadian platform.
Okay. Can we put in this way that at the end you have two clients exactly equal, and only the difference is this part, international degrees. In this regard, what will you do?
It's a tough question because again, it really requires the depth of experience, right? Like I've hired individuals within my team who have not had Canadian experience, but I did see something in them that was very promising in their ability to present themselves in that interview. We have many individuals that work within the companies I've worked for that have been successful and outperformed Canadian domestic applicants for that very reason. So it's not a black and white, I would say. It's again how you present yourself in the interview, how you are able to communicate your skills and experience, and really at the end of the day, how are you presenting your value as the top candidate for that role?
So there is no worry, because I have heard lots of
No.
clients and YouTube video tutorials say that hide this part, and as you mentioned, there is no worry in this regard.
No, I think, there's going to, unless you're in the room making the decision, behind the scenes like myself or with the hiring manager, you're not really going to fully know what's prompting their decision. So what I would caution is people jumping to conclusions and sharing that opinion as fact. Like I said, we have many examples, too many to even name, where we have individuals who have come here into our organizations that have either minimal or no Canadian experience who have dramatically outperformed though their counterparts in the interview process. It has nothing to do with their abilities whatsoever from a different country.
Okay, I appreciate that insight. Thank you so much. What's your advice for applicants who worry about appearing overqualified?
So, the one area that when I start to look at individuals who are quote unquote overqualified, like I guess we're talking about two different areas, right? The one area is if they're skills are feeling like they feel that their skills are overqualified for the job or their level is overqualified for the job. The latter being the like whether your level is overqualified for the job is a little bit of a red flag. And here's where I would say this. So if you are a director level experience, your most recent role, maybe your last 2, 3 roles were at director level, and I see you apply for a manager level job, it's going to raise questions. It's going to raise questions as to why you're so willing to take 2 to 3 steps below the hierarchy process. And obviously, from a compensation standpoint, would you even be satisfied with that drop in your application? So that's one I wouldn't say red flag, but one area that might kind of maybe question, what the intent is behind it.
Sorry, in this point, how
Yes.
can they tailor this part if they want?
Well, I mean, I would never suggest tailoring your experience in regards to what that is. And maybe the offset to that is explain that if you choose to submit a cover letter and maybe giving them context as to why they're deviating away from their previous trajectory, that could be the value offset to that. But if we're talking about your skills and experience, understand that you can be depending on the type of company you work for. So let's take 2 equal companies. However, the role that you play in company one is very transactional, it's very day to day, and you don't really deviate outside of your lane of your job. But the other company, equal job, but because of the way it's structured, you're able to touch a lot of different areas that are beyond your job scope. You're able to do a lot more depth of experience. Don't be afraid to put those experiences on your resume because that actually is very valuable because that speaks to the diversity, the flexibility, the critical thinking, all those great competencies we talked about earlier. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're overqualified, it just means your depth of experience is greater.
Thank you. Okay. Continue. As I mentioned, this question regarding high qualified. What are your recommendations for highly qualified or expert level candidates when applying for general or entry level jobs? How can they position themselves effectively without appearing overqualified? Because most of them are newcomers and
Yeah.
they want to have a supply job. What is your recommendation in this regard?
Well, I mean, this is a tough one because I mean, when you're that highly qualified or expert level job and you're looking for an entry level job, I think, the context behind why you're doing that matters, and it's going to help offset maybe some of the questions or the apprehension that the recruiter or the company might have when reviewing your resume, and that's where the cover letter comes in. Or even in the summary statement of your resume where you could be very clear about what you are seeking is to gain an entry level position, as a new applicant within the Canadian market. Those can be certain things, certain aspects that will help, really kind of preemptively answer the questions that recruiters or the company might have if you're that overqualified.
Uh, I have a question in this regard
Sure.
because most of the clients usually omit their advanced education. For example, if they have a PhD or a master or bachelor, based on the job description, only put for example, diploma or any education that it is necessary.
Mhm.
Is it good point or not?
Well, I would always recommend, not being deceitful or deceiving in your resume,
It is
right?
not a deceiving. They are
No, no. What I mean
okay.
by that is, the experience that you've had, the education that you've had. My recommendation is always to have it in there. I wouldn't purposely leave it out to accommodate because I think what you're looking for is, you never know what can happen, right? Because when you're seeing an opportunity that you can apply for, no one is very sure as to what the employer is looking for. So that information is valuable regardless of, what the job description might say. If you have a PhD from another country, the recruiters here understand that, while when an individual transitions from one country to Canada, regardless of where it is, there could be opportunities where they have to really kind of take a step back, reshape, and acclimate to the Canadian market to get back to where, to the level that they're accustomed to. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not looked down upon here at all by any stretch. So, but you never know that the organization you be working with that you're applying to, you could potentially grow within that organization, and they might look to you with longevity as in mind, considering the fact that you have all these accolades. So leaving them out is not what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. I hope that all hiring managers watch our video and
I
have
hope
this
so
mindset
too.
Yeah, exactly.